On this episode of Catholic in America, we're going to be talking about why do we celebrate Lent and how do I get the most out of it. So stay tuned. Guys, we're talking about Lent, and we're not talking about that stuff in your dryer or in your belly button. We're talking about Lent.
Oh, yeah. Lent. Fish fry Friday.
I
I
have to throw out all my notes now. I was prepared for a completely different show, but okay.
You guys didn't want to do a stinger, so I got your stinger for you.
I'll talk about the season Lent. I do want to say, as we're having this this conversation about Lent, for everyone to like and to share and to subscribe. It really does make a huge difference. I know we kind of, we say this every time, but for you, if you're watching these videos, if you could like them, if you could share it with friends, if you could subscribe to our channel, it just helps this to get in front of more people, and it really helps support us. So we're really grateful for y'all's support.
Yeah. So it's great. And so what about it? Why do we celebrate these 6 weeks of Lent? I mean, what is Lent? First of all, someone describe what Lent is.
It is the holy fast. It is the holy fast of the church. It's a season where we, like Jesus. Jesus goes into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights and fasts, and so we go with Jesus spiritually into the wilderness and we fast. We deprive ourselves of good things like food, and we spend more time in prayer and almsgiving, and so that's kind of what it's focused on, and it really helps us prepare for the great feast, which is Easter.
Right. Yeah. So I think people can grasp onto fasting, and I think they can grasp onto the prayer part, but maybe not the almsgiving part, because it seems like such an old English, like traditional type of thing, and we don't really hear people saying, using that word as much today. So what do we mean exactly about almsgiving?
Acts of gratitude, man. I mean, acts of generosity, that we're grateful for what God has given to us, and therefore we want to share the giftedness that we've been given with others. So that means that we might have a little less in our bank account, or we might have a little less time to binge watch Netflix, or that we might have a little less time to do, or a little less of our talents, which are devoted towards our own interests, but that we are grateful, we're thankful. It's also why Lent is a time of gratitude and thanksgiving. Like predominantly, actually, it's not a time of like where you're miserable and where everything sucks and it's terrible. And Jesus says very clearly, like, when you fast, don't fast like the hypocrites who let everyone know that they're fasting. Like when you fast, like put on your happy face, or my mom used to say, put on a smile, like greet people with a smile. Don't let them know that you're fasting. Likewise, when you give alms, don't proclaim it to everyone and tell everyone, look at how much I've given to the church this week, or look at how much I gave to my sister or my brother. No, it's like, no, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Shut your mouth, smile at them, and move on your merry way. The whole point is, like, it's not like this. It's not where, like, we cover ourselves in sackcloth and ashes and wail from the rooftops. No, it's this time of gratitude, thanksgiving, and this time where we remember that, it's a time where the world's not all about us. Like, it's a time where we work on our narcissism.
Yeah. What's the spiritual principle behind, though, not letting other people know? I mean, I think we all can kind of think, we don't want to brag. But what's the spiritual principle behind not making it very apparent that we're doing this? I mean, because look, we have 6 weeks of it and everyone knows we do. So what's the spiritual principle behind that?
I think for me, it allows me to really kind of internalize the sacrifice. If I'm fasting from something, fasting from food, or if I've given something up for Lent, a lot of times people choose to do that. They have something they give up, something that's dear to them and important, and a good too. You should always give up sin. So if you're like, I'm giving up, taking drugs for Lent, it's like we should do that all year round. So there's.
But if you're going to give it up, if you're going to start, you might as well start during Lent.
That'd be a good time to start.
Absolutely. It's a good time to turn from sin as well. But I think it allows you to grow in intimacy with God, and I think Jesus actually says that when he says, when you give alms, when you fast, your Father who sees you in secret will reward you. There's something about that. It allows me to give this away, not so I get the acclaim and exaltation of other people, but so that I can have this deeper relationship with God. Because in a sense, when I give money to the poor, to charity, to the church, when I provide for other people's needs, and it's sacrificial. When I fast or when I take time for prayer, it has the potential to open up a space where I can have greater contact and intimacy with God. I want to be closer to Jesus. Hopefully that's the point. I would recommend anybody that what you want after 40 days of Lent is to be closer to Jesus at the end of the time than you were at the beginning. And if so, then mission accomplished. Accomplished. But I think if I then tell everyone about everything to you, and in a sense, I fill up that space with the accolades and the acclaim and the esteem of others rather than that place of relationship with God.
Right. Yeah, because I think, what can happen too, and that spiritual principle is that we begin to do it for those reasons, so people will see us, so people will give us the praise. That's what Scripture says. Don't do it so they'll say how good you are. You do it in secret so that your Father in heaven knows in secret. But it's for the goodness of it itself.
I'd also, if I could add, I'll throw in a kind of a play on words. Which is that Lent is a time where we are called to be hallow and not hollow. And this, like, you look at that play, HOLLOW versus HALLOW, like this, looking at the things that like are fun, sweet, pleasurable, but ultimately like leave us with a sense of hollowness, like they're empty and like we're not happy. That's why we have to keep going back to the alcohol or go back to the chocolates or go back to whatever it is. But like at the end of the day, like this sense of hollowness that oftentimes that the pleasures of the world, not in and of themselves bad, but they don't ultimately leave lasting satisfaction. Versus like I don't go out and proclaim from the rooftops that I gave away some money or I spent some extra time with a friend, but like I walk away from those experiences of helping someone out, of charity, and like I don't have the claim of others, but I do have this sense of being filled. Like I'm content. And so it's why that hollowness versus the hallowness, like God wants to hallow us during the time of Lent. He wants to fill us up, actually. He doesn't want us to empty out. He wants to fill us up with his own Spirit. And that's why we have to make room for his Spirit by letting go, by releasing, by giving things away, by giving time, talent, whatever it is, to other people so that God can ultimately fill us up.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just think it's interesting that the pillars of Lent, I said Lent, the pillars of Lent, the Lenten season of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, those have really been kind of like picked, like maybe as a church we haven't practiced them well, or we kind of have gotten away, like we don't want to talk about fasting. We don't want to deprive ourselves. We want to make people feel good. Don't do penances, which is not what the church teaches. You should do penance. You should make yourself uncomfortable. You should, we're the most, particularly us who live in the Western world, we're so comfortable all the time, to do something that's actually going to make me uncomfortable. There's something beautiful about that. But we've stopped talking about it. So the world has picked it up. So now you have philanthropy as kind of like a stylish sort of thing of how much can I give back? Or you have, think of like charity water or something. You've got people that are now fasting is like the health craze of our generation, talking about intermittent fasting and 4-day fasts and people, do juice cleanses. In a sense, like they're talking about how it resets their minds and bodies and hearts and spirits. And then you have, like kind of meditation and mindfulness becoming this kind of craze now. So in a sense, it's like the world is having to recreate what we've always known, and I think unfortunately we've forgotten. We're not practicing very diligently as Catholic Christians, which is prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. So to really be serious about that for these 40 days, and I think on the other end, it's not just, we don't do it for those reasons that the health crazes do it. We don't do it so I just feel good about myself. But that is the unexpected consequences oftentimes that happen, or unintended consequences, is your health does improve. You do lose some weight, or your mind is, in a better place because you're spending time meditating on the Lord and on his passion, on his love for you. And so it is just fascinating, like on the natural realm, that they've picked up something that a lot of times in the supernatural realm we forget or don't practice very diligently.
So, go ahead, Father Doug.
I mean, that was going to be, a little bit of my next question. Before I get to that, though, I've found it very interesting as being a former non-Catholic, looking around and seeing, as you're saying, this society and culture is starting to pick up on some of these things, and I'm not so sure if they know exactly why outside of the benefits that come from it. But I'm starting to see it more so. I'm starting to see it in not just in Episcopals or Methodists, which is what I grew up in, and we had some sense of this a little bit. I think because there was still a connection to our Catholic roots in that way, but starting to see it even with Baptists and Presbyterians and people who may have at worst a disdain for the Catholic Church, or at best they're kind of not really don't really care too much for us. But you're starting to even see that with them. Ash Wednesday will be celebrated, at least where we are, by some non-Catholic churches that are not Methodist and Episcopal. The idea of fasting during this time, even if they're not calling it Lent, is starting to take place. People are starting to do it. And so, it's just interesting, fascinating to me to see that it's not just happening in general society, and it's not just happening in the Catholic Church, but it's starting to happen with non-Catholics who at one point gave this up or didn't practice this anymore, and are starting to see real spiritual fruit and value. And maybe this wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe we shouldn't have given it up, or maybe now's the time to reinstitute some of this stuff. So I think that's all. Again, it's pretty interesting to me.
Well, I think that also jumping into that, Father Doug, is that there's also this notion that people who take their faith and take spirituality seriously have serious practices. And this is not just with the Christianity. You have Ramadan and Islam, and then you have the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of the Tents in the Hebrew for the Jews. And then likewise, that's really actually where we get our practice of Lent. It comes, my understanding is from the Feast of the Tents, the Feast of Tabernacles, where the people of Israel had to meditate upon their time in the desert, where they had failed God, where they had worshipped the golden calf, and where they had to do acts of penance, and where they had to do acts of recognizing that they were sinners. And I think that also part of the Lent, which grows out of the feasts that Jesus himself, especially in the Gospel of John, Jesus always went up to and practiced the Jewish feasts. Actually, most of his major miracles happened around those major feast days, one of which was Tabernacles in John 7, 8, 9. So you have this notion of the feast, and people who take their faith seriously, they do have cultic regular practices where they want to do something special and unique, not so much because they want to be necessarily seen, but because they want it to be something which is meaningful. And that's why the season of Lent. I also say this, the thing about Lent is that it's not just about these physical acts and practices, but it's also what manifests and shows itself through these things. Because if you're anything like me, or maybe you guys are much better than I am, but I usually I choose a Lenten fast, and 3 days into it, I screw it up, a week, 2 weeks, maybe I'm really good for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it gets hard, and I'm just it's the same thing working out. I work out for 4 days, and I'm oh, I'm done with it. But there's that sense even if you fail in your Lenten practices, that itself bears fruit, which is the fruit. It can lead you to the fruit of humility, of recognizing I'm not as strong as I thought I was. I do need God. I am a sinner. I keep falling back into my old habits. And like the people of Israel in the desert, we sin. We do have false gods, and we do worship other things other than God and God alone. And so it's a way in which God, one, manifests the things that are actually happening in our lives, where he gives us truth, and along with that, humility. So it's the same thing as I tell people, and they're they come to confession. And I just also like to point out, or at least this is my thing, people come to me a lot and they confess that they broke their Lenten fast. I'm well, technically that's not a grave sin. You just show you don't have to go to confession just because you broke it. It just shows you how weak and kind of how pathetic you are. And I say that because I'm weak and pathetic, and I do it myself. But that's the thing is no, these practices great if you do try to get all the way through, perform your Lenten fast or your practices. When I'm giving advice. Yeah, well, I'm giving advice for people for things that they may choose. The advice I usually give to people is don't pick something you won't fail at. Pick something that's a challenge. Pick something that is a true sacrifice. The truth of the matter is during Lent, if you've failed at it at least once,
you picked the right thing, because it's something that should be. I mean, I fail at almsgiving. I fail at prayer. I fail at fasting. These are things that are practices. That's what they're there for. I mean, the whole reason why, football players and musicians practices is so they don't fail. But that's the moments that you do. And even in games, they fail. Even in a concert, they don't play their best, whatever it may be. So the whole point of it isn't to pick something that you can do. At least for me, I don't think it is. It should be a challenge. It should be something that you're giving up for a specific purpose, and whatever that may be. But the specific, but the purpose is to grow closer to God. I mean, there really is the whole point of the spiritual life, of the Christian life, is to grow closer to God. So if and this is something I hear, or I got asked as well, and I'll let you guys answer this too, is well, you guys do this for 6 weeks. I mean, what happens before and afterwards? I mean, what, you just do it just for 6 weeks?
Well, I'd say that if you give up something which is sinful, then you're called to do that. I'd say also, like, it's at that notion, like, it's a temporary practice. But if it's like you added something to your routine, so like you decide that you're gonna go exercise and you don't exercise, and now you're gonna exercise, or that you're gonna pray more, like, you might want to keep that Lenten fast up afterwards. If it's a negative fast, I'd say that, you can go back to it, as long as it wasn't something like I gave up cussing for Lent, and now I'm going to go back to dropping F-bombs. I'm going to go back to cussing. Like, continue that fast forward. I'd also say this, though. I always encourage people not to take on a Lenten fast that's going to become a fast for everyone else. So, like, if you're going to become a complete jerk every morning to your wife because you gave up coffee, then please don't give up coffee. Like, but take on a fast where it's your fast. It's not going to be other people's fasts. I don't know. Maybe not, Mike, you might disagree, but
no, I agree with that. I would say too, like, something as simple as giving up coffee is a great fast. But if it's going to inconvenience other people, maybe say, I'm just giving up coffee creamer, or I'm having the junky coffee and not like the good stuff, the gourmet, things that I, or like, the latte or something like that. I have a shot of black coffee, and are you
gonna have a lobster on Fridays instead of fish sticks?
Yeah, we talked about at the beginning about fish sticks rather than lobster. But I would say there's something beautiful that the liturgy of the church, and I would just recommend this to anyone who wants to explore Lent for the first time. The liturgy of the church, meaning our public prayer, our public masses that we have, starting with Ash Wednesday, but all the way through what's called the last week of Lent, or the after the end of Lent, leading into Easter, which is Holy Week, that the liturgies, the prayers of the liturgy, the readings that we're using each week, they're beautiful. They're really powerful. It's awesome too, because we're also journeying with those adults who are coming into the church, who are getting ready to be baptized at the Easter Vigil. So just the whole experience is great. So I would just really recommend people, if you haven't been going to church, haven't been there in person, to make Lent a time to kind of resolve to do that, to start coming to. If you've never been to a Catholic Mass before, Ash Wednesday is an awesome one to start with. That might be our biggest Mass of the year, which is kind of amazing to me. Sometimes even bigger than Christmas, which I don't completely understand. But it's just a great experience. Those Masses during Lent that help us to really kind of grow. And it's usually more toned down. The music, it's more somber a lot of times, but it's just really allowing the Word of God to speak, and so we can get to know Jesus throughout this whole season.
Yeah. So these 6 weeks that I practice, I practice these three things amongst my spiritual life. What's kind of the effect that maybe that we hope for? Not the reason we're doing it necessarily, but what's the effect that maybe we're hoping for out of this as a secondary result for Easter, for the Easter season, and for the rest of the liturgical year? I mean, what would you say to someone who says, you just do that for 6 weeks and you give it up and you don't get anything from it, or you don't get, anything out of it, or you're only doing it for those 6 weeks? What effect does it have on the rest of your spiritual life, the rest of the year?
And I would go back to my earlier answer that hopefully at the end of the 6 weeks or 40 days of Lent that you're closer to Jesus. And so that's something that's good for everything. And if I've learned something about myself by being tried and tested and going through a little bit of, fasting, a little bit of deprivation, physically or emotionally, or not, watch my favorite show, I think I'm going to be a better man for it.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. It's that you get to know Jesus better. You get to become a better friend with Jesus. And unlike John the Baptist, who spent all of his time in the desert, Jesus didn't spend all of his time in the desert. He went into the desert and then he left the desert. Like Jesus knew when to fast. He knew when to have a party with his friends. Like that's the thing is like there's those moments where you have these feasts. You have the special moments, the special seasons. Like there's 4 seasons in the year that God created, right? And so, like, right. you need to have certain seasons, and there's different seasons for different things. That's why in the liturgical calendar, like, we have the seasons of the church, and why seasons point to things that are important at a particular moment, but that's not the only season in life. So, like, right. Lent is the season where we remember, as the chosen people, we emenesis, we zakar, we remember who we are and where we've come from and where we're going. And so, like, that's the whole point of being in the desert, is this idea of remembrance, this spiritual recollection with God, where he becomes present with us, and that we remember that as good as the things are here, we are being called somewhere else, which is to the homeland that our Lord went ahead of us to. And that in order to get there, there's not just one path. Like, you have to walk through the desert. You have to walk through the time of preparation and testing, and recognize that God doesn't accept perfect people into heaven. He takes the imperfect and purifies them.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one year I was working. This is before I was a priest, and before I was actually in active ministry. I was working in an office, and it was me, another dude, and about 5 ladies that were in the office. And I remember one year I gave up coffee and beer for Lent, and so I thought, this would be really good. And by the Tuesday after Ash Wednesday, so I hadn't even made it a week yet, the ladies cornered me and told me, all right, buddy, you're either drinking coffee or beer. We can't take you not doing one or the other. We can't take you doing both.
Don't do a penance, which is going to be a penance to other people.
Yeah, I didn't really realize that I had taken on too much. I didn't know that it was having such an effect on me and my personality or my disposition. And so, there's to a certain extent there. That's the reverse side of, not wearing, not having a sad face and, not letting people know, right hand what the left hand's doing. I kind of got called out and kind of in a bad way. Well, we hope that something that we've said will help you with your Lent and help you to experience a very blessed Lent, and that you will use this time to grow closer to God and allow his love and his mercy to come into your life and permeate your life throughout this season and hopefully on into the Easter season as well. So thank you, Father Tom. Thank you, Father Mike. And thank you for joining us. God bless. See you next time.
Whatever the original intent for social media was, it probably wasn't this.
Well, I'm sure you've seen this viral video.
And to the B.
Gaming Week Day 3.
This egg is the most liked Instagram picture.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right?
Okay, so tell me all about this.
Yikes. See what I mean? However, at St. Dominic Media, we found a much better way to do social.
It is a joy, a pleasure to want to spend time with the Lord and with one another.
If you delight in the Lord, he would give you the desires of your heart. And so I prayed him to send me to the right church. And so he led me to the one that he established, which is the Catholic Church.
So I'm sitting in my quiet space, my time with God, praying for my grandchildren.
Understand that the devil isn't only the enemy of our souls, he's the enemy of our human nature. And so what God has joined, he wants to rupture.
Judeo-Christian values.
You corrected it. Judeo-Christian values. Your brain corrected it. Oh, that's fantastic.
Every year, we produce hundreds of dynamic, faithful Catholic videos that reach millions of people, both online and on television. At St. Dominic Media, we're doing the heavy lifting of creating good, quality Catholic content, and we'd love for you to partner with us, either by visiting stdominicmedia.com and following the share link, or by using the offertory envelopes offered by your parish from OSV. Help us sow seeds far and wide as we use new media's potential for good. Together, let us invest in and grow the kingdom.